Hi there. Welcome to Bermuda's Stay Ready Storm coverage presented by Lindo's Group of Companies. I'm Glenn Jones. In true Bermuda's fashion, we're trying something new. Here I am at home, and there you are on the internet. This is not the traditional way to broadcast a public affairs program, but it is consistent with our new normal, you have to admit. And to be completely honest, we have no clue how this is going to go, but we're all in to give it a try. Live interviews, live cameras, useful, practical content, we're ready. You can see some of the live cameras showing up now. We'll have cameras all over the country to give you a perspective of what's going on outside in real time. And as you see right now, the weather's looking pretty good. We hope you enjoy it. And please roll with us if there are any tech surprises. We want Bermuda to turn to this resource to prepare for the storms that will surely come during this hurricane season and every hurricane season. We're calling this new idea Stay Ready Storm Coverage, and we're starting right now with this Hurricane Preparedness Special, streaming live across Bermuda's platforms. The goal is simple: elevate the way our community prepares for and recovers from a storm. From a media perspective, we're going to achieve that goal by raising the bar on the way we cover severe weather, tropical storms, hurricanes, whatever comes. Bermuda is already the market leader for local storm coverage, fast and accurate. My job is to complement the Bermuda's track record with anchored content that provides context, commentary that is considerate, information that is actionable. That's what you can expect during this hurricane season. Experts, too. We'll call on people who know what they're talking about and make sure they're sharing what they know with you. That's the big picture on what we're trying to accomplish. But there's a lot behind all of this, a lot. And I can't wait to share it with you. We're going to start by taking a look back, set the stage on why we think staying ready for hurricane season is so critically important. Here's a Bermuda's retrospective on Hurricane Gonzalo, almost 7 years ago now, October 2014.
Hurricane Gonzalo is continuing on its forecasted track towards Bermuda, and therefore everyone should continue to prepare for significant wind and waves starting later tonight. This hurricane is an extremely large storm, and we should expect that at least for 24-hour storm force winds will be in effect. During this time, I want to encourage everyone to stay inside and to particularly stay off roads. Already, there is high surf in the South Shore, and the Department of Parks is placing signs warning that public beaches are closed. No one should take the risk of surfing or attempting to swim in these very dangerous conditions. Bermuda, we are prepared. Well-rehearsed plans for most contingencies are enacted, and as we hope for the best, we certainly must prepare for the worst. We will come through this storm together. Once this serious storm has passed, it will be for all of us to work together to restore our island home to normal. Bermuda, we can be confident in the preparation for all the responsible agencies, both in advance of this hurricane and for anything that might take place after the hurricane. Significant resources will be positioned in the east end of the island should there be any damage to the causeway. Likewise, full hurricane plans have been activated by the hospital and other agencies, which will ensure responses to any emergencies as soon as it is safe to do so.
A good look back there. That was Hurricane Gonzalo from October 2014, a devastating storm. I also remember it being a long duration event. I wrote it out right here in this house, and it seemed to be forever for that storm to actually pass us. Also remember, Gonzalo came right on the heels of Faye, pretty much back-to-back storms. Faye was initially forecast as a tropical storm, but pretty much every Bermudian said, no way, that was no tropical storm. And sure enough, the experts later elevated it to a hurricane. The insurance industry puts insured losses from those two storms, Faye and Gonzalo, at $125 million. Those are damages to people's homes and businesses, serious impact on lives and livelihoods. Storms are no small thing. In a moment, Dr. Mark Gouchard will join us live, the director of the Bermuda Weather Service. But first, let's take one more look back, this time at a 2016 storm, Hurricane Nicole. You know, looking at the vegetation and infrastructure damage from that storm, I'm reminded how quickly we got back up on our feet. And a lot of the credit there goes to Belco, the Department of Parks, and Bermuda Regiment for kind of having a very, very fast recovery. Joining us live now is the director of the Bermuda Weather Service, Dr. Mark Gouchard. He's at the weather office right now, and we're really glad to have him here. Good evening, Dr. Gouchard.
Good evening, Glenn. Thanks for having me, and good evening, Bermuda.
Great to have you. He's here courtesy of the Bermuda Airport Authority. Listen, we found some really interesting research we wanted to talk to you about. So let's show it to the viewers first. Here it is. It's the number of hurricanes that have come within 100 nautical miles of Bermuda over the past 177 years. So between 1842 and 2019. This is really amazing stuff. Of the 99 storms recorded here, 46 were in September, 36 were in October. That means more than 80% of the storms happen in a 2-month span of hurricane season. As you know, hurricane season is June 1st to November 30th. And interestingly, there is no hurricane recorded in June for Bermuda. And in July, just one. So back to you now, Dr. Gouchard. I'm all for being prepared, but some will look at that data and say, I've got months before I need to get ready. You know, what is Glenn talking about? How do you push back on that?
Well, thanks, Glenn. I think here on the island, we have a lot of experience with storms, and we all know the things that can go wrong. The shutter that you forgot to secure properly so it can blow off its hinges, or finding out the batteries that you have are drained so you can't listen to the updates if the power goes out, not updating your insurance so you have to cover any damage expenses out of pocket. So being prepared early doesn't just mean boarding up your house or bringing in your lawn furniture this early in the season. What it does mean, though, is ensuring that you have a place to put that lawn furniture and making sure that you have enough boards or shutters to close up the house when it comes time. If you have elderly relatives or young children to look after, make sure before storms become more frequent later in the season that there's a plan for A, their movement if necessary in advance of a storm's approach, and B, their safety and care during and after the storm. Having an advanced plan early on in the season is key to avoiding a real last-minute problem.
All right, that's really good, actionable info. Also, we found some good data on damage estimates, and I wanted to talk to you about that. So check this out. Storm insured losses since 2003. Hurricane Fabian is what jumps right out at you. $225 million in losses from that one devastating storm. People still talk about it, of course. Who could forget Fabian? A Category 3 blow, sustained winds 120 miles per hour with gusts to 132. We mentioned the double blow in October of 2014, pushing losses past 125 million. Hurricane Humberto was another monster category 3 storm that was September 2019, up to 30 million in insured losses there. And I want to hammer home just one point as everybody's looking at this. The estimated damages from Fabian alone outnumber all the other storms on this list combined. So it just really explains how devastating Fabian was. So back to you now, Dr. Gushar. We're approaching $500 million in damages if we just look at that one chart. But fortunately, Bermuda protects life very well. So we didn't see a lot of lives lost during that same span. So to that extent, what are we doing right?
Well, Glenn, we have a number of things going for us here in Bermuda. One of the hallmarks of Bermudian resilience is our experience. So as you rightly mentioned, Humberto in 2019 was our 99th hurricane since we've been keeping records of them. Paulette, last year, Hurricane Paulette, a Category 2 storm, was our 100th. So with 100 hurricanes under our belt, including an uptick in Bermuda storms in the last 20 years or so, this has resulted in the community being very well practiced. This extends to our partners on the Emergency Measures Organization and the countless, and I won't try to name them, public, private, and nonprofit sector agencies that play a role in keeping Bermuda informed and safe. Our cooperation and communication has continually improved through the last several years, and that leverages the good work with other stakeholders like your good selves in the media, and of course, increasing information being put out on social media. And all of that has led to a public who is a little bit more aware these days about hurricane threats and also better informed about what good preparedness looks like.
You know, it's a double-edged sword. It's one thing that I'm glad we're well practiced at, but I really wish we didn't have to be so well practiced at it. All right, so thank you, Dr. Gushar. Stand by. We'll come back to you. Your expertise is just what we need to sort through all of this. In the meantime, let's talk some more about protecting your home. Our friends at Friesenbrook Meyer, sponsors of this program, have some tips on double-checking your home coverage before the storm comes. This is really important. Here's Chief Underwriting Officer Zara Ward.
You need to understand what is covered under your home policy and what is not covered under your home policy, and preferably in advance of any hurricane. Nobody likes a surprise after you've already had a claim. So now's a great opportunity to pick up your policy wording or ask your insurance company if you don't have a copy. Go through it as carefully as you can and reach out for any questions that you might have. Changes can be made to your insurance policy if your insurance underwriters and you talk about it in advance, discuss it all ahead of time, have it all documented. You're good, but it needs to be done before a hurricane.
Zara has some more tips to help you stay ready with the home coverage you need. Just point your cell phone's camera at the QR code on your screen and it'll take you to Zara's full video. At Friesenbrook Meyer, they know how to stay ready. Okay, a very short break now. You're watching Stay Ready Storm Coverage on Burn News, presented by Lindo's Group of Companies. We'll be right back.
Hannah, can you hand me the Lindo's bags, please?
What do you need the Lindo's bags for?
I have everything I need for the hurricane in these bags.
Mommy, are these batteries for the flashlight?
Oh no, these batteries are for your father's Xbox controller.
We're live on Burn News, Stay Ready Storm Coverage, presented by Lindo's Group of Companies. It's just approaching sunset outside, and we wanted to show off a little bit with some live cameras positioned around the island. You got a peek at these earlier. For us, this is sort of a practice run for hurricane season. When a storm is approaching, we'll use live cameras to give you a real-time and safe perspective as the storm approaches. These aren't the actual locations we'll use during Stay Ready Storm Coverage, but we are grateful for the opportunity to test drive things with our weather watchers up and down the country. If you recognize any of the live camera locations, tell us about it in the chat. And we've got a lot of live cameras, so I'll pause for a moment to give you the opportunity to have a good look. After a rainy day, that's not bad for an end of the day there at sunset. Looks really good outside. Okay, a quick shout out to the sponsors making all of this happen. Not only our title sponsor, Lindows, but also Friesian Bookmeyer, Duracell, Ministry of National Security, and Belco. We could not pull off this somewhat crazy idea without them. I mentioned before the comment section, and that's something I want to just draw your attention to again on whatever platform that you're watching us right now for this live coverage. Let us know what you think. We love to hear your feedback. If you have questions that are related to hurricane season, go ahead and ask them. Some of the experts we've asked to tune in are going to help out with those questions as well. And if you are on social media generally about hurricane season, we ask that you use the hashtag StayReadyBDA. We expect to be using that over the next 6 months as we launch this Stay Ready storm coverage on Bernews. So we took a look back in the last segment. Now it's time to look forward. First off, remember, hurricane season is underway for the Atlantic region. It began June 1st and lasts until November 30th. Dr. Mark Bouchard is back with us, and he knows about a month ago, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration in the U.S. put out predictions for this year's hurricane season. We're going to give you a closer look at those and then talk to Dr. Bouchard about them. So forecasters predict a 60% likelihood of above normal hurricane season activity. That means above average activity is the most likely outcome this year. So we should take things very seriously. They think we'll have 13 to 20 named storms this year, and 6 to 10 of them will be hurricanes. Of those, 3 to 5 are expected to be major hurricanes. That's category 3 or above. Ultimately, forecasters don't expect this hurricane season to be as busy as last hurricane season, which is really good news because last year was a record breaker. But it's all little comfort for Bermuda because it takes only one big blow to make things very difficult, very complicated for us out here in the Atlantic. And one more note, we should also show you that NOAA redefined what it means to have an average hurricane season. You can see in this next chart what the averages used to be and what they are now. So bottom line here, more named storms and more of them are going to be hurricanes. That's the prediction. This certainly got my attention. So Dr. Bouchard, when an elder member of my family says, I don't remember there being this many storms back in the day, I should really listen to them. They know what they're talking about. So what's the science behind this?
Absolutely, Glenn. You don't have to be a scientist to appreciate that Bermuda storm activity has been getting worse over the last few decades. For context, this is happening in the wider Atlantic, with countless studies over the last decade pointing to changes in storm characteristics and impacts. With our long records of surface observations and upper atmospheric measurements diligently taken here by our team of observers at the Bermuda Weather Service, combined with the longest time series of continuous ocean measurements anywhere in the world being maintained and continued at the Bermuda Institute of Ocean Sciences, we were able to conduct a study on Bermuda hurricanes that we published earlier this year. And the research found that not only are Bermuda tropical cyclones, that's a more scientific term for tropical storms and hurricanes, not only are Bermuda tropical cyclones getting more frequent, they are gradually getting more intense.
Okay, so then going into this season, what are your thoughts about the predictions we see from NOAA? 13 to 20 named storms, 6 to 10 hurricanes, 3 to 5 would be major. In layman terms, to me, that feels worrying.
Yeah, well, certainly over the years, the conditions have been becoming more frequently conducive to active hurricane seasons. This year's seasonal predictions, not just from NOAA, but from many other agencies, are above average, and furthermore are being measured against a changing backdrop of more activity being the norm. This is an extension of what we were just talking about. As the number of storm impacts gradually increases through the years, it's only natural that the long-term normal should be adjusted each decade to reflect the new average reality. And some of this is subject to natural forcing, like volcanic eruptions and periodic changes such as the solar cycle. However, it turns out that there are much larger and much more sustained human contributions to these changes. And I think we're going to elaborate a little bit more on this point a little later on, right, Glenn?
Yeah, that's right. Before we get to that, though, let me ask you, the folks in your office, are you able to take the general prediction information that comes from NOAA and then say, all right, we think this share of storms will actually get into Bermuda's region. I imagine that's probably more difficult to do, but I wonder if that's something that you guys take on.
Not really. I mean, the challenge there is that there have been years in which there's been very little tropical activity in the Atlantic, but then we get smacked here in Bermuda. The best example that springs to mind is Hurricane Emily in 1987, a year when there were only 7 tropical cyclones in the Atlantic. Similarly, Hurricane Andrew's devastating impact in Florida was in a year with a very low storm count. Conversely, some extremely active seasons have not yielded much by way of storm impacts for Bermuda. The second most active season on record in 2005 didn't see any major impacts locally. So as you will have heard and will continue to hear repeatedly, it only takes one storm to make it an active season for us here in Bermuda.
Yep. Okay. Dr. Gouchard, thank you. Stand by. We're not done with you yet. We're going to move next to talk about the EMO. So if or when a named storm threatens our region, the Bermuda Emergency Measures Organization convenes. All the relevant government agencies, emergency services, social services, all working together to keep you safe. We caught up with Bermuda's National Disaster Coordinator, Steve Cosham, and he gave us an EMO 101.
So the EMO stands for the Emergency Measures Organization. It consists of key senior members of government, including permanent secretaries and heads of departments, and also including outside agencies such as Bermuda Weather Service, BALCO, and Bermuda Hospitals Board. It's chaired by the Minister of National Security, Renee Ming, and depending on the disaster or the emergency that Bermuda is facing, the membership of the EMO may change. For example, for air crashes or aircraft incidents, it would involve various agencies associated with the airport. And for a marine-based incident, the agencies and companies on the water would be involved.
Okay, so then if there is a severe weather coming, let's say, and you have the appropriate people around the table, how do you go about making your decisions? How does it all work? How do you decide, for example, when to close the causeway?
Okay, so closing down and opening up the island revolves around public transportation and schools. Children have to be in school to allow parents to attend work, and children and parents need public transportation, the buses and the ferries, to get to school and work. So before a hurricane strike, we work backwards. So the causeway closes roughly at 50 knot winds. It all depends on what the wind direction is and the state of the tide. But bus drivers need to get home before the 50 knot winds are on set for the island. The buses stop. Of course, the marine ferries are stopped long beforehand. People have to get home, schools stop, and government and private businesses stop. See, we just put that in reverse. And then for opening up the island, the first priority is to clear a pathway from east to west for the ambulances to get through in case anybody needs medical attention, which is completed by the regiment, public works and parks. The bus routes are checked, ferry docks are checked and channel buoys are checked. Schools are checked for power, damage and access, and schools have it in their standard operating procedures that they will always be closed for the immediate day after a hurricane.
Well, so then there's some tells there for the public as well. So if roads are reopening and schools are reopening, we know the recovery period is underway.
Yes, so the key is to listen to the Bermuda Weather Service. They have wind anemometers around the airport, and so we know the wind state around the airport and around the island. So once the wind has died down sufficiently, and of course the lighting allows, so we don't do recovery operations during the middle of the night because trees can be wrapped around power lines, then the regiment, public works and parks will be straight out doing the road clearing process. The trouble there, of course, is everybody wants to go out and check their garden and their neighborhood. That's natural enough. But then they want to go out and sightseeing. And that can impact on the regiment and parks and public works going around the island and clearing the roads. And that's very hard to police because people do want to sightsee, which they shouldn't do, but they also want to check on their neighbors or maybe some family members that may be some miles away from their house. And so you can imagine if you can't contact your granny or your uncle or somebody, that you want to go around there and make sure they are fine and they're not injured or the house isn't damaged.
Yeah, no, that is natural. I totally get that. But we could also see how it's disruptive, right, to the recovery. So that is a
Absolutely.
delicate balancing act. So let me just ask you finally, we see from the data that September and October are the times of year when the storm activity is at its height. But here we are in June, and we're really preaching people to get ready now. Can you just help us articulate why it's so important to stay ready ahead of these storms?
Yeah, so there's a number of things that you have to do around the house, and we see people leave it to the last minute, and we have a hurricane coming and it's in 2 days away, and people say, right, I need to repair those shutters. Well, you don't have the time to go down to the hardware store, buy the brackets you need or the wood you need, get the shutter down, sand it down and repair it. That all has to be done well ahead of time. So the 1st of June, which is the start of hurricane season, but for us it doesn't really start for a few months. That's the time to start making that list and start making the repairs. It's also a good time to make a list of what you need to do in your house. What food would you like to have in your hurricane supplies? Check your batteries in your radio, make sure the crank still works in the radio if you have one. Plug in maybe your all your devices, make sure everything works on battery and on the mains. And that's the time to do the check, because if you go to the store and they haven't got it, you have time to go and replace it.
That is excellent advice on why we all need to stay ready. Thank you very much, Steve, the National Disaster Coordinator for the Bermuda government. As Steve mentioned, the person leading those EMO meetings is the Minister of National Security, Renee Ming. We'll speak with her shortly. But we wanted to take a minute to acknowledge how difficult things have been lately. Some workers and business owners are still feeling the impact of the pandemic. Money is tight and the recovery is long. But as you look at your expenses, you have to be careful about insurance. If you haven't had a claim in a while, you may think it's a good time to cut back on your coverage, save some money, and who can blame you for that? Ultimately, it's your property and it's your call. Here's what the pros at Friesenbrook Meyer have to say about the risk of being underinsured.
One way that people might be looking to do that would be underinsuring your home. So that's insuring your home for less than the replacement value of your house. The trouble with that is that while it may save you a few $100s every year at renewal, it may cost you thousands and thousands of dollars at the time of a loss if you did have hurricane damage. Your claim would be impacted by the percentage that you were underinsured would then be applied against your claim, and you would be responsible for that portion of the claim, which, unless you are a really amazing saver, you probably don't have in your bank account. So please reach out to your insurance company and make sure that you are fully insured, that you are in a comfortable place, so that should the winds blow, you won't have a problem.
Zara has some more important info on underinsurance. Just point your cell phone's camera at the QR code on your screen and it'll take you to the full video. Friesenbrook Meyer is a sponsor of Stay Ready content. Let's pivot now to my conversation with National Security Minister Renee Ming. I started by asking her about keeping the community safe in a pandemic and during hurricane season all at once, something she's had to do before.
I became the minister last year, July, so all I know is managing a hurricane through the pandemic, so I don't actually have anything to compare it to, but what we do is, I think that we're trying to be proactive and start early. So we started our hurricane preparedness statement, I wouldn't say now, it was over a month ago, and that was to create awareness in the public to think about hurricane, to think about your preparedness, to think about what it is that you'll need in the event of a hurricane. So and then the addition to that is ensuring that you have the PPE that will be required as well. And so we're saying, in our statements, we've said to people, ensure you have 7 days of PPE. And that's important because as we navigate the pandemic, we're still wearing our masks. There are persons who still need gloves. We're still using disinfectant on our hands. And so we're asking, when you're putting together that hurricane package for your home, that you take into consideration those items as well.
All right. Well, I can relate to you when it comes to baptism by fire. Trust me. I spoke earlier to the National Disaster Coordinator, Steve Cosham, and he said, one of the things that keeps him up at night is the thought of a Category 4 or 5 storm and the impact that could have on people's homes, and then their needs to go to a shelter, and then the shelters becoming overrun. And it is kind of easy to see logically how that could kind of snowball into something that's really, really dangerous. I wonder for you, is there something that kind of worries you when we approach hurricane season? Do you have the similar worry as Steve?
I have a very similar worry as Steve. We work very closely with the BWS we have no control, right? Mother Nature is definitely at the helm there. But we want to know like what it is that we can do, like where do our preventative measures kick in. But we also recognize that a hurricane that's category 4 or 5 would be significant for the island. And we do our best to try and put like whatever measures we can in place. Bermuda has been blessed, and as a people, I believe that we're very resilient. Our infrastructure has never been tested to that level outside of 2003, I believe.
Yeah,
and we generally get ourselves back up and running in a very short space of time. And when I say up and running, not everyone may not have electricity and things like that, but the country starts to move and is progressing toward getting itself out of the hurricane side of it and working on the recovery and getting things up and going again. So I do share that concern that Steve would have, is because that kind of brings into a whole different aspect, and we don't know what the outcome would be for the infrastructure, and so our resilience would definitely be tested at that time.
Well, you're certainly right when you say kind of Mother Nature is in control, but of course the one piece we can control is how prepared we are. So you're a year into the job now. How do you describe getting the community prepared? Is it easy, or is it even more difficult than you thought? How do people respond to that idea?
Truly, I actually think the community does a great job of getting themselves ready. Our job is to continue to create awareness and put whatever information we can out there. We have gone through the winter. I believe we had 2 winter storms this year. So we were being proactive in making sure that the public knew how to prepare even for winter storms. And although they're not generally not as bad as a hurricane, there is some preparation work in terms of yard equipment and things that had to happen. But I think Bermuda does extremely well in getting prepared for hurricanes. What we'd like to see, though, if there's anything, is we're doing it a bit sooner and not waiting until the hurricane is actually cold, like that you have all of these things in play. And so our role through the ministry is to try and be proactive. We've put out early communication, and we'll continue to repeat that over the next 4 to 5 months, because we strongly believe that the more prepared you are, then the better you can be in terms of managing your own homes and households through the hurricane.
That's an excellent point to end on, Minister, because the objective here really is for everybody to kind of stay ready. So get ready in June, even though the bulk of the hurricane season doesn't happen until much later in the summer.
Yes,
Minister
absolutely.
Renee Ming is the National Security Minister and Chairperson of the Emergency Measures Organization. Thanks for spending some time with us.
Thank you, Diane.
My thanks again to Minister Renee Ming. Hey, have you guys seen this thing? Duracell has a power bank that would be clutch if the power goes out during a storm. On one charge, it can fuel your smartphone from empty to full 3 times and works with most devices that use a USB cord. Listen, even when the power isn't out, you can use this thing to keep your devices powered while you're on the go. That way, no matter what's happening or where you are, you can get the latest information from News. I'm told you can get one of those cool power banks wherever you can buy Duracell batteries. I was surprised to learn from the News team that even when a storm knocks the power out, people use mobile data plans to jump online and on social media. All of them desperate for the latest info and probably some live pictures like the ones we're showing right now. A little later, I'll explain how our Stay Ready coverage will be a great resource for you when a storm comes near. For now, let's get to some more prep tips for you and your family. On the Bermuda government website, you'll find a 15-point plan on how to prepare for a hurricane. Point 9 is about building a hurricane kit for your home. That's something our friends at Lindo's know about. I talked about storm prep with Lindo's manager, Zach Monez, by first figuring out how he stays ready on storm inventory during storm season.
So I think batteries are a key part of it. The other stuff, canned goods and all of those things, we always have a steady inventory. of product ready to go. Batteries are the ones that you have to sort of plan a little bit ahead for hurricane season and make sure that you've got enough stock. And then the week of a hurricane, we're always calling the vendors to get more batteries 4 or 5 days out. So we're monitoring the storms very closely to see what direction they're going to go in, how bad they're going to be. We're using all the apps, you know, all the storm tracker apps, whatever you can find. Everybody's got their favorite one, and everybody's giving their 2 cents about, okay, well, I think it's going to do this, I think it's going to do that. And we order based on what we think is going to do our best guess. So flashlights and batteries, those are the kinds of things that the week of the storm, we're ordering feverishly. Even though we do have enough in stock, it never seems like it's going to be enough. And
well, you know, I was going to ask you. I mean, we've been at this for a long time. Do you feel like you have it down pat, or is it always a little bit hair raising, and every storm is different?
Well, since Fabian, every storm is hair raising. So even if the last 2 storms that we had, or 3 storms, they came out of the north, which didn't seem to be as bad. But you don't know what the storm is going to do, right? So it could be a Fabian or a Gonzalo or a Faye. And if that's the case, then we've really got to make sure that we've got what we need in stock. So when it comes to the batteries and the flashlights, those are the 2 main things. You know, we've got our buckets, we have things like that that are ready to go. But you know, and as far as food goes, canned goods and other things like that, if people are going to lose power, what can they use to make quickly in a hot pot or something that doesn't require electricity? So we generally have that kind of stock, and especially with COVID right now, our inventory levels are so high anyways. But even outside of that, you know, your Franco-American and your Campbell's and that kind of stuff is pretty well stocked. I remember Fabian, and that was the first thing. The Campbell's shelf was completely bare. I had plenty in the warehouse, but we couldn't keep up. Thankfully, Belco at this point seems to be able to, they're well prepared. And when we lose power, it's never for very long. You know, some people, obviously, it's 3 or 4, can be 3 or 4 weeks. But recently, it's, you know, I don't know if you've noticed it, but the power comes back pretty quick. And that's hats off to Belco for that. Because
no power. I was going to say power to them, no pun intended. So let's talk about your customers really quickly, because we're in June. We know most of the hurricane season action happens toward the later part of the season. So how do they get ready now? I mean, if I'm going to the store with my shopping list, you know, flashlight's probably not on it. Should it be?
Yeah, I mean, I think it should. You know, those kinds of things that you can have in the house ready to go. Batteries and flashlights and a bucket if you've got to dip into the tank. Other than that, you know, making sure that you've got some inventory in your pantry of things that you can prepare quickly, right? So those are the things that you're really looking at. Other than that, I mean, you're not going to buy fresh produce for a storm that's coming in September and April. So you can't really get ahead that much, but certainly batteries and flashlights are something that you should probably have on hand, because, you know, a winter storm can be just as bad as a hurricane sometimes, right? So having that ready to go is probably a good idea if you live in Bermuda, for sure. Candles are another one that you can have in house. You know, matches, some sort of lighting, something to light a stove or light a candle. Those are always good things to have around, for sure.
And first aid kit supplies from your pharmacy as well, right?
Oh yeah, so they have Band-Aids, bandages, you know, which you should probably have in your house anyways. But yeah, definitely, absolutely.
All right. Well, Zach, thanks for helping us stay ready for storm season. I know on your website you have a good list of things that people can have a look at for their hurricane supply kit. I encourage everybody to check that out. Thanks, Zach.
Thank you, Glenn.
Okay, I want to make sure we're being transparent, so I'll mention again that Lindo's is title sponsor of our Stay Ready storm coverage. Duracell, mentioned earlier, is also a sponsor. These sponsors, along with the Ministry of National Security, Friesenbrook-Meyer, and Belco, will help us over the next 6 months get fast and accurate information to all of you. We may even have a few more other sponsors. I have to tell you, we have some things planned. So you've already seen some of the live cameras around the island. I see that they're back now. This is my chance as well to get to see these for the first time. It's the approach that we're going to take when a storm is approaching Bermuda. The cameras will move around to the best vantage point to get a good view at the storm's approach, depending on where it's coming from. So it won't necessarily be these locations, but it should provide you a safe opportunity to see what's happening outside so that you don't have to go and explore it yourself. So whenever there's a tropical storm warning or hurricane watch, that's when the Stay Ready coverage will spring into action, and you can turn to BurNews for that. It will include live press conferences, the latest storm tracks. We'll have analysis from people like Dr. Gouchard and Minister Renee Ming and Steve Cosham and others. And also we'll be able to show some user-generated content. All of you do an excellent job of putting onto social media the things that are happening around your house. And what we're asking is that anytime you use that content to also tag it with Stay Ready BDA, hashtag Stay Ready BDA, and that's gonna help us to condense all the content. Great look at those live cameras around Bermuda. Getting pretty dark outside. Let's talk about storm watches and warnings next. And as I walk you through these definitions, Dr. Mark Gouchard from the Bermuda Weather Service will rejoin us. So Mark, I suppose I'm not the first person to mention that it can be a little bit confusing on the watches and the warnings. So we wanted to show people what to expect in that regard. So typically, a watch comes first. So a tropical storm watch tells us tropical storm conditions are possible within 48 hours. But when we get to a tropical storm warning, tropical storm conditions are expected within 36 hours. A tropical storm, of course, is between 39 and 73 miles per hour. A hurricane is at least 74 miles per hour of sustained winds. Just like the previous definitions, a watch is possible hurricane winds within 48 hours. A warning is an alert to expect sustained hurricane force winds within 36 hours. So Dr. Gouchard, that's the stuff that we got from NOAA. When it comes to here in Bermuda and the Bermuda Weather Service, are you using those same guidelines?
Yeah, so it's worth saying that in the Atlantic, the Caribbean, the Gulf of Mexico, all the weather services coordinate via the World Meteorological Organization's Regional Hurricane Committee, where we lay down all the areas of coordination throughout the region, including the definitions of watches and warnings, which are pretty universal as you've displayed them here. That being said, each jurisdiction has its own ways of dealing with storms. So I would just want to spend a minute or so to explain how we deal with things here in Bermuda. For clarity, the U.S. National Hurricane Center, or NHC, is charged by the committee to make predictions of the characteristics and tracks of each tropical disturbance in the region, whereas it is the Bermuda Weather Service's role to observe, forecast, and warn on the local weather conditions. So at BWS, we augment the standard warnings by labeling storms a threat, potential threat, or not a threat to Bermuda. And this status is communicated along with other Bermuda-centric information via tropical update bulletins, or TUBs. And this year we've updated our procedures so that we issue these TUBs, these bulletins, when the tropical system in question is within a defined area that represents historical landfall risk for Bermuda. So that way you will no longer see bulletins from BWS on storms that will have no relevance to the island. And if you do have interest in seeing information on storms that are not forecast to come anywhere near our vicinity, for example, in the Gulf of Mexico or deep in the Caribbean Sea, there is a wealth of information on the NHC website. So to sort of recap that, our bulletins will be definitely focused much more on Bermuda-centric and Bermuda-relevant storms.
And the National Hurricane Center does a good job of pushing out that information about other storms on its social media channels as well. I'm one of the people who follow them, so I do get to see what's happening in other parts of the Atlantic. So let's throw up the wind speeds next to educate people on that. We touched on this earlier, but this will be a more comprehensive list of what the wind speeds are, particularly as it relates to the category of hurricane. So you can see category 1 starts at 74, 75 miles per hour. You've got the translation or the conversion to knots there as well. And then it goes up from there. Once you get past category 3, you're talking about 130 mile per hour sustained winds. which is very, very dangerous. And Dr. Gushar, what's the biggest category storm we've seen here in Bermuda? I imagine as far north as we are in the Atlantic, cooler waters, Cat 4 and Cat 5, that's going to be pretty rare.
Certainly in recent memory, Category 3 Hurricane Fabian has been the biggest impact so far, as you rightly pointed out earlier in this broadcast. However, there have been Category 4 storms on the doorstep near Bermuda in recent years also. In 2011, an intensifying Cat 4 Hurricane Ophelia brushed by the area to the east, demonstrating that conditions in our area can be conducive to such intense storms. Fortunately, we haven't seen such an impact yet, but it remains an increasing possibility year on year.
I guess we've been tiptoeing around this a little bit, but you know, the globe is warming, the climate is warming, the ocean is getting hotter. I mean, we need to expect bigger storms, right?
Yeah, as you might have gathered from my previous comments, the simple answer to this is yes. Warm water is the fuel that provides the energy for hurricanes to form and intensify. As oceans continue to warm, this fuel is indeed getting more and more abundant, allowing storms to become more intense for Bermuda. Over 60 years of continuous ocean measurements have revealed an inexorable warming of the upper ocean, and other atmospheric studies point to storms reaching their lifetime maximum intensity further and further north. And yet other studies indicate slowing trends in storm forward motions, increases in rainfall in warmer and more humid air, and of course, gradually increasing propensity for higher storm surges given sea level rise. So all of this results in greater potential impacts from tropical storms and hurricanes as the climate continues to change.
So if that's happening, I know that this is going to impact what policy shapers do, but I've just been thinking about building codes. And I know, generally speaking, Bermuda stands up well to hurricanes, but if the storms are becoming more intense, do our building codes have to also strengthen in lockstep?
Well, I'm no engineer, but I do know that our building codes are pretty robust and provide another layer of resilience to wind damage. In fact, are rated to quite a high wind speed. Having said that, I don't know that the building codes themselves would need to change. I'll leave that to the planners, but I will say that we need to ensure that construction practices continue to adhere to that high standard, and that property owners take responsibility for ensuring their properties are further secured by installing storm shutters. Owners of coastal properties need to also take into account the potential for storm surge inundation, especially on the south and east facing shores of Bermuda.
Okay, well, thanks for all of your contributions today, Mark. As I look at some of these live cameras beside you, maybe you should take a bow because the day was awful. But as soon as you came on Burn News, the weather is perfect. So well done.
I can't claim credit, but thank you for that, and thank you for having me, Glenn.
Sure. I look forward to working with you over the next several months as we get through these storms, but I'm also hoping I don't need to see you until next year at this time, because then it means we didn't have any storms. Dr. Mark Bouchard of the Bermuda Weather Service joining us courtesy of the Bermuda Airport Authority. Thank you. So the 2020 Atlantic hurricane season had a record-breaking 30 named storms last year, including 13 hurricanes, 6 of them major. In fact, they ran out of names and started using the Greek alphabet to name the storms. Here's a look at the names for this year. We already went through Anna very early in the season. That's the one at the top of the list. So that one's taken care of. We had Bill this week. So already we're off to a roaring start in the Atlantic. Here are the names that follow. Any of those names strike fear in you? I have an aunt, Claudette. She can be fierce. In fact, I kid about that, but one of the things that I do, which is totally not scientific, is I associate the characteristics of a person I know with these names, and I presuppose that those are going to be the characteristics of a storm. A very not academic or smart thing to do, but a fun thing to do, and that's, I don't know, I guess I'm just being transparent about one of those. As we wrap up, there's a couple of things that I want to mention, just that we learned through the process of putting together this special. One of them comes from the Minister of National Security. She wants all of us to think about being available to check on our neighbors as we all recover from a storm. One of the problems that we find in our community is that if the power goes out, or even if it doesn't, the tendency is to drive somewhere to check on a loved one, and that's absolutely natural. But sometimes it can be disruptive to the recovery. So if there's a plan in place where everybody knows that neighbors are going to check on neighbors, then it might alleviate some of that pressure. It's a good neighborly thing to do. Now, the other thing that we learned is that the averages suggest more storms and more intense storms. And of course, we learned from Renee Ming and Steve Cosham that one of their worries is that we'll have a category 4 or 5 storm and have a lot of structure damage that could overwhelm our shelters and leave a lot of people unable to return home because the structural integrity of their home is not safe for them to be inside. That's the big worry. But when we look at these trends, I think at this point, we have to expect that a storm of that size and strength is coming. And it's probably coming in our lifetimes. The question is, will we be ready? My thanks again to our sponsors and to all the content gatherers who helped us to put this program together, to the team at Bernews who responded favorably to this crazy idea, and to all of you, the viewers who tuned in to watch this. I hope it does get you thinking about being properly prepared for hurricane season. It's a little bit dark outside, but we can go back to the live cameras as we leave you now. And again, my thanks for spending some time with us this evening. You've been watching live Stay Ready storm coverage presented by Lindo's group of companies. For Bernews, I'm Glenn Jones.